So we're talking about the discovery to, the awakening to, and the discovery of the deepest part of ourself that's never been born, never entered the stream of time. What is its nature? Its nature is freedom.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So before anything else, before everything else, I am free, and then everything else exists on top of the freedom. Right?
Right.
Versus, for most people that don't know yet, their deepest conviction is what? Like you just said, bondage. So it's a very big difference, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why we want to assume no relationship to the content of consciousness is to discover that primary freedom. The reason we want to assume no relationship to the content of consciousness is to discover that primary freedom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So would you say that's a valuable thing to do?
Yeah.
How valuable?
Very valuable.
Very valuable. On a scale from 1 to 10, how valuable?
10.
Very good. So the reason we're doing this is so we can awaken to and discover the deepest dimension of ourselves, right? The nature of which is a primary freedom. And what's interesting about this is mystics, yogis and mystics from all the great traditions have realized this and discovered this and known this. So in all the great traditions, the greatest mystics will describe in different ways the same discovery of this primary or inherent freedom that exists at the very ground of ourselves. So the true self, with the capital S, is the self that's always already free. Its nature is freedom already. Its nature is freedom already. Its nature is freedom already. So that's why we're assuming no relationships with the content of consciousness, so we can have that discovery for ourselves.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
And what's very interesting about it is it's very scientific. Because anybody who genuinely assumes no relationship to the content of consciousness, if they're really doing it, only if they're really doing it, will discover this. Because it's true that the fundamental ground of our experience is a primary or fundamental freedom. And the reason that we're coming together, the reason why men and women go to the top of the Himalayas to assume no relationship with the content of consciousness, or the way people from all over the world gather and come to into a situation like this, is because it's hard to see this, because it's very subtle. Because we usually look at our experience through a lens that is very gross. It lacks subtlety, so we don't see it. And very specifically in this case, because as I've been explaining, because we've been trained and conditioned only to see objects, things, we miss it. Because it's easy to see things, big things, small things, and if things get very small, you have to look through a microscope. Then you can even see subatomic things, particles. You can see, but it's very difficult to see the deepest ground of our own very being. It's not an object. So there has to be an enormous capacity for subtlety in our perception. Has to be cultivated. An enormous capacity for subtlety. Like I remember, I kept saying, my teacher said, "I'm glad you found a friend you're never going to be able to see. I'm glad you found a friend you're never going to be able to see. I'm glad you found a friend you're never going to be able to see." Same thing. So the reason people go to the Himalayas or they come to places like this is because they know, in order to be able to see and recognize this primordial truth, that the nature of the self with a capital S is freedom without beginning and no end, is because we need to create the conditions where we can concentrate, turn our attention within. So our attention, our inner eye, can awaken, and we can begin. It begets a capacity to perceive that which is subtle or not so obvious will develop in us, and then we can awaken to and become aware of things and truths that otherwise is not apparent to us.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So that's why people have been going to the Himalayas for so long and gathering in groups like this to do this kind of practice. Because there's a degree of subtlety involved that requires concentration, focus, and leaving go of all distractions that'll take us out of this.